Hey, it's me, Freddy times 3. For this video, I'm going to do voiceover instead of text to see if it's easier. So, voice reveal. Yay!
Anyway, let's talk about King. Specifically, my King cosplay.
Part 2.
For the golden plate on his collar, I cut a circle of EVA foam.
I also etched in the symbol. I then took my Dremel and I carved it in.
I also filled in some cracks with quick seal while I was at it. For paint, I used a basic yellow acrylic paint for the base color. I then used a darker yellow to paint in the symbol, which will make it stand out more. For the final touch, I took some gold paint, which gave it a really nice shine. To change things up, I did a cape instead of a collar. I took this red blanket I found at a thrift store, and I cut it into a cape and glued the edges together. For the final touch, I glued on the golden plate.
And that was it with the cape.
For the tail, I used 1-inch foam to make the shape. I then used a bendable wire, same one I actually used for Spring Bonnie. I bent the wire into a shape, and I glued it into the foam tail. I took some old shoelace I found lying around, and I glued it on. This will allow the tail to go around my waist. For the fur, I went to the good old Joann's Fabrics and bought some black fur. I cut it into shape, and I glued it on. And while I was at it, I decided to add some fur to the head.
Which led to a bit of a mess. Going back to the tail, after the black part was glued on, took some silver fur, and I added the silver tip to his tail, and glued it on. And now the floofy tail was all done. For his cute little paws, I took 2 basic black gloves, took some black fur, and cut them into the right shape. Hot glued all of it on. I made sure to do this to both hands, and I gave it a little trim, which left a furry mess again. Next it was onto the claws. Cut little pieces of pink insulation foam, and I painted them the same color I painted the head. At first I thought they were too small, so I trashed them, and I got bigger pieces, which seemed to fit perfectly.
I painted said pieces with the same color. I then glued them on to the floofy paws, and we were done with that.
First I did the chest. I cut the shape I wanted onto construction paper. I then laid the construction paper on the black fur, and I cut it into that shape. I found even more shoelace lying around, as well as some leftover elastic, which I glued onto the chest. The elastic piece will go around my neck, and the shoelace will go around my back. This will keep it from falling off my shoulders. Was feeling pretty good about it. That was until I saw the fur on my work table. Now on to the tummy. I took a patch of the silver fur, I cut it into shape, and I glued it onto the chest. Also, working with fur, I highly recommend to brush it onto the waist or the thighs. I cut the shape on 1-inch foam. I then glued all the pieces together, then glued on the black fur all over. Here's how it looked. When putting it on, I would slip the thighs underneath the shoelace attached to my tail. It actually worked really well keeping them on. And that was it with the waist. I also forgot to mention that fur, again, literally got everywhere. For the arms, I wanted to do these golden bands that wrapped around his forearms.
Took some EVA foam, I wrapped it up into a cylinder, and I glued it.
I made sure to make it wide enough for my hand to fit through, but also tight enough for it to not fall off, and worked out perfectly.
I then cut a thin strip of EVA foam, and I wrapped it around on the top and bottom, which gave it a nice detail. Before moving on to paint, I sprayed on some Plasti Dip FYI, remember to use gloves as well as a respirator when spraying on stuff such as spray paint.
After the Plastidip dried, I glued on the symbol. This is the same symbol King has on the golden plate and on his collar. Also, to smoothen it up, I used some Quick Seal. This will make it look less bumpy.
For the paint, I used the same light yellow color paint. Painted about 2 coats, which made it look really nice. I then took the darker yellow to paint in the symbol, and that was it with the arms.
For the feet, I took some old boots I found lying around. I then took some pink insulation foam pieces. I cut them into the toes. Then took some black fur. As well as I glued them under the toes. And that was it with the feet. Took some sweatpants I had lying around. These would act as my black covering for my legs. I also took this black cloak, of which was from an old Halloween costume, which would cover my chest as well as my arms. Now on to the fun part. Dress up. Finally, it was all done. After all the hard work, I'm really proud with how it turned out. It's gotta be my favorite cosplay I've made so far. I also had a lot of fun making it, besides the fur. But I'm happy with the journey that I had with this cosplay. I'm using the EVA foam, the fur, the cape, the boots. It all was a frickin' blast.